Welcome to Roll to Hit Gaming's 15 favorite games.
Today we're going to talk about our 15 worker placement games.
Now, to avoid duplication, what we've done is each put together a longer list than our favorite 5 each. And we compared those together. Any duplications, it was whoever had it higher on the list was the winner, and their lower selections would be selected down the line. So for Roll to Hit Gaming, I'm Chip.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Lucas. My number 5 is from Bellwether Games, and it's Coldwater Crown. Now, if you're a regular follower of the channel, you've seen us talk about this game a few times. I think we all really like it, and basically, you've entered yourself into this giant fishing competition where you're going to fish the different locations, the lake, the shore, and the river, and then you're going to have all of these various side contests where you can gain victory points by catching the right combination or catching the biggest fish or the different species. This one is worker placement in that it's worker manipulation. You're going to place a worker on the board and take an action based on whether it's on its 1 or 2 more powerful side. And then you're also, in turn, going to take one from the board and take that action based on what side it's on and then flip it over. Really nice package, really great theme for us. We really enjoy Coldwater Crown.
Yeah, what a great game, right? And the thing is, I guess it just slipped my mind as a worker placement because it's a disc.
Right.
You know,
right. Yep.
But yeah, man, it is. And it's really fun. Yeah, that's a great pick.
I really like it too. There's so many different ways that you can win in that game to gather those points. You're trying to get the most fish, different species, the highest catch in the lakes versus the shore. It's very, very interesting. I mean, it's intuitive. You have to really think out your moves and decide, where do I need to go get my bait and when do I need to try and get that fish. So with the worker placement aspect, it's a wonderful game of give and take and giving it to someone else. So Coldwater Crown is definitely a keeper.
What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Florenza. It's by Placentia Games. In this game, you're in Italy and you are commissioning artworks. The artworks are for not only your own district, but the cathedral and the districts around the city. The worker placement comes into the game because you need resources in order to build your art. So you're going to the market, you're going to the quarry, but you can place your workers on your the other players' spots on their board because they're building up their house, their own district. So it's not only just the board, you have worker placements all over, and it's very interesting. You bring artists into it, and you can slowly see the build of the city. So it's a really interesting game, and that's Florenza.
Yeah, a lot of games have that build your own worker placement spaces.
Yeah.
But those are typically yours. The neat thing here is that you can go on any one of the other players' spaces for a fee. Another cool thing about this one, though, is that you're a noble or a leader of your house, working to make these works of art become a reality. But you still have to have an artist to do it.
Yeah,
and you have all of the various artists, and they're all people from history, except for your generic artists, which obviously are less skilled. And they're only going to be in town for a brief period of time, right? Every turn, you shift those cards left, and once they fall off the time tracker, they leave town. Neat little ad.
Yeah, I love this game. I like the way those artists come in and with their timing mechanism. I tell you, this game, it intimidated the heck out of me when I first played it because you're handed a player aid, and I love player aids. This thing is a player menu. It's almost encyclopedic. I mean, there's a table of things that you can build, but once you kind of see how it all fits together, it really plays very well. I really like the game. Well, my number 5 is going to be Carson City Big Box, and this is area control worker placement in the Wild West. I love this game. There's a lot to it. It was a little bit a little bit intimidating at first, but once you get rolling with it, it's a great game. You're worker placing to either secure territory by putting down land deeds or building buildings on top of it, building different structures, or gathering resources, or even shooting out with your opponents. So great game. And let me tell you, you can all be jealous because with friends like mine, this is the gift that I get for my birthday. Lucas and Jolynn gave this to me one birthday of mine, and I couldn't be more happy. Great game, Carson City Big Box.
There really is a lot to that particular game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the worker placement at the top, there are so many different spaces you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't think that with all that it's very tight, but the board itself is because it's almost sandboxy because you can ranch or you can mine or you can build more of the city, and that it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's a really interesting game.
Yeah, there's a ton of those worker placement spaces up at the top when you're kind of preparing for the season. And I like that mechanic. And, this idea of fighting it out over a given worker placement space is not really, it's not uncommon anymore, especially with this theme. But thematically, I loved it because, granted, for most of the game, you don't have to play that game that way if you want to, but eventually you're going to have to throw some lead to get what you want.
Yeah, right.
Thematically, I really, really enjoyed it.
And I like the timing mechanism of the worker placement too, right? Because it's the snaking path.
Yeah.
So now you have to say, oh, well, he put his, it's not normally in worker placement, you place your worker, take the action immediately.
Right.
This one, you're going to place it, and then once all are placed, we're going to start the cycle, right? And so now you're looking at your opponent going, oh, well, he put a couple workers before mine. Those are going to trigger first, then mine, right? Yep. So that was a neat little addition. So those are our number 5s.
So for my number 4, I chose Colbert the Great Card Game. This is from Stronghold Games, from Kiesling and Kramer. When you think of worker placement, normally you don't think cards. But in this one, you are basically digging your coal out of pits. You're putting those onto trains, and you're sending those trains off to distant lands to fulfill contracts for points. But your worker placement comes in your workers, which are cards. So if you want a upgraded engine, or if you want a particular contract, then you would send your worker out there to it. The trick of that is, let's say you send out a pack of 3, like 3 workers. If Lucas comes up and he's like, well, I need 1 too, he has to do +1. He has to send even more workers out to get what he needs from the same spot. So it was really interesting because you have to manage how many workers you have and how you're going to distribute them out to get to your end game. So that was my number 4, which is Colbert and the Great Card Game.
Yeah, the workers you have have a value. The workers that are cards 1 through 3, I believe it is, and then in higher games, I believe you also have a 4 and a 5 if you add more players. You don't get change. So if you spend all of your singles and you can't put the right number on adding that worker, you're going to lose some of your actions and lose a little bit of your efficiency. They obviously didn't want to have the classic worker placement. I put my guy here so you can't do it. But the ability to also do that, but at an additional cost, is great because it adds some of that early bird catches the worm, right? You've got to really try to plan out what your turn's going to be. I really enjoy that game as well.
Yeah. My number 4 is going to be a kind of a sleeper for Cool Mini or Not. It came out a year, maybe 2 years ago, called Dogs of War. And just by the name, you might skip it over, and the box has some very interesting art on it. But this game is really interesting in the way that you are playing, I guess, the leader of a house of some type of repute or reputation, and you're delivering your workers to to support houses of the area, whatever fantasy setting this is in, that are warring. You yourself are not warring, and you're not necessarily warring against your opponents. Your house is not warring. You are sending support and sending influence into these houses that are at war, and so you have to choose your sides, and based on the outcome of the war, depending on which side got the most support, those houses will rise and ascend and other houses will fall. And your support and prestige gained from those houses are going to translate at the end of the game into victory points. Mm-hmm. So it's a juggling match of watching how valuable support for House A is and how much influence you've given, how much reputation you've built with them. And your opponents see that and then will try to counter by bringing that house down through shifting their support. So it's real fluid. But I really like the way, and it's real tight, the way that the mechanics work together.
And the fact that it's cool mini or not, right? So you can just imagine they have these busts, basically, that represent your...
very overdrawn.
Big hats with feathers. So, the production value of the game itself, on top of everything else, is outstanding. So, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I really don't... I was surprised to see this on your list. I really don't remember much about playing it. I remember that we played it several times... in one setting, and I figured the game out pretty quickly. And then at the end of that game, everybody went, "I see what you did there," and they stomped me for the rest of the night. So, but I do remember enjoying it. So, yeah. My number 4 is from Artipia and Stronghold Games, and that's The Pursuit of Happiness. And in this one, a lot of people call it gamer life. Basically, your workers in this one are time markers, and that's basically what you're doing. You're fighting against time until you die. And you put out your time markers, and you're spending that amount of time in this period of your life to gain resources or to complete projects or to buy items that will try to make yourself happier. And the entire idea is, how can you live a life full of happiness better than the other players? So there is no block the other player in this worker placement game. Everybody is available to place everywhere else. You will block, obviously, when you buy an item, they can't buy it and stuff like that. But you can also kind of overwork yourself and say, I'm going to do this action twice. And if you do, it adds stress, right? And you have a separate stress tracker, which will, negatively impact your health. So you're going to have to do some projects that improve your health. Otherwise, you're going to die before the other players. And the interesting thing about that is, if you don't increase your health at some point, you may die, and they may get one, or if they've been really good at playing, 2 more turns than you. So you're really going to get stomped for living hard and dying young. So, I really enjoy this game. I have a great time playing it. It's just, for me, a joyful game to play, and that's Pursuit of Happiness.
Hey, Joe, you know what happens when you look under the insert in a game box?
You find the zombie apocalypse.
That's right. You find the bad things that can happen to you in life. So Jolene and I really didn't care for this game too much because we thought it was overly sappy, because no bad things ever happen to you throughout your life. And we actually found out that they did. In fact,
slip some events
in that could be bad. We found those. So now we need to try it again, I guess. Apparently you can have bad things happen to you. I do like the game. It's fun. It's lighthearted.
Yes, it is. It's a good one. And like I said, I want to try it with the events. On top of the worker placement, it's that press your luck with placing those workers that I really enjoy. Like, do I want to place just one more?
Right.
Do I want to stress myself out to the point to where it's really going to hurt me, or do I really need that thing? So I do enjoy it, and I want to try it with those events in it.
And as much as I hate sand timers in games, the way that they have incorporated sort of a time aspect into this game, I do like, because the more stress you take, the less time markers are available to you to put out.
Yep.
So that's perfect I love that, where if you put a real time kind of aspect on me, I'm flipping out.
But and it's a great thematic tie, right?
Yeah.
You're spending the time of your life to do these things.
Right.
Yeah. Really cool. Yeah. Those are our number 4s.
Well, for my number 3, I'm choosing Stone Age by Z-Man Games. It took me a long time to get this one to the table, but I really like the worker placement in this. The incorporation of a little bit of luck with that dice roll, but it still won't really completely throw you off. I mean, if your dice don't go your way, so you don't get as many resources as you would have, but it's not terrible, right? It's not going to ruin your day. But just adding a little bit like that really put this one in top marks for me. It's not as tight as other worker placement games,
Yep.
so I kind of feel a little bit comfortable playing it. But just really fun, set in the Stone Age. We're all, Stone Age folk trying to build our tribes and be successful. I mean, can't get any more simple and better than that.
It does seem like of all the worker placement games that I've played, it is more laid back.
Mm-hmm.
You can get more workers by
Mm-hmm.
going to the huts, but it doesn't seem that tight. There's a place where, like, if you're going hunting, you can put multiples there. So that's the thing, you put multiple workers in a particular area, you'll have more success.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you got to kind of determine how much am I going to invest
Right.
into lumber or to get stone
and
to build, right? So there is that interesting piece to it, but it's very easy, very laid back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel stressed when I play
not at
it.
all.
Yeah, and I've heard that criticism before about the dice. If you never throw me a curveball, that's kind of difficult for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I need to be able to react to some things for your game to have some depth. And, the different resources are more difficult to acquire based on how precious they are.
Yeah.
So if, you may need a 5 to get one resource, whereas you would only need a 3 to get another resource. So you need to send more workers to that spot and plan yourself out and improve your odds and build up your tools, which allow you to manipulate your dice, to find success here. And I think that's a depth that criticism is not taking into account. I agree with you. I enjoy that game.
Yeah.
My number 3 is Manhattan Project Energy Empire, which at first glance would appear to be an expansion for Manhattan Project, which I haven't played, but it's not. It's its own game, and it appealed to me because the idea is you're building up your energy empire, all the while polluting your environment. And everybody has their own environment that you're adding pollution tokens as you go, which are also the game timer, which is brilliant. It kept the game short and tight. So you've got to balance the need for more energy, which will get you more workers that you place, or the pollution that it's offering, because your environment grid has, maybe 12 or 15 spaces, and each one of them has a victory point on it that if a pollution marker is covering, you don't get at the end of the game. So you need to generate your energy and remove your pollution so that you can get those points. But the coolest thing was, at the beginning of the game, you deal out everybody nation cards. And each nation has their own basically special power and their special starting situation, and how they influence the United Nations is different. And that's another area where you gain victory points based on how far you went up the UN track. Again, it's a dice thing like Stone Age was. But, it's basically you're getting 1, 2, or 3 energy. So you could build yourself a bunch of wind and solar and not generate pollution. But you're generating less potential energy than if you went nuclear, which is always going to give you pollution. But there's more energy icons on that dice. Neat package. Really enjoyed Manhattan Project Energy Empire from Minion Games.
Another thing about that is as far as putting out your workers for Energy Empire, it has that same bit to where if you want to go and invest in industry, and then Lucas wants to go invest in industry, he has to put out a worker plus additional energy. So, you've got to determine, is that what I want to do? Do I want to invest that much more? Because energy is kind of finite for that round until you generate new with the dice that you roll. So if I go to where he wanted to go beforehand, he has to determine, okay, I've got to invest more to do that same thing, or do I hold off and just do it next round? There's a lot of interesting tidbits in this. There's also an event deck in it, kind of like with the Pursuit of Happiness. That made me happy. So there are things that are coming up that you have to overcome at the end of each round. So it's a really interesting package. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely something I want to bring to the table again. Now, for my number 3, this is a game that I've mentioned before in previous lists because I just love it, and that's Yidoh by IDW Games. This is one kind of like Lords of Waterdeep, which most people know that game. You're going out and you're trying to gather assets in order to complete missions, in order to gather prestige points to win the game. You'd send your workers out to get influence with the geishas or weapons or whatever the case may be. You're fulfilling missions, and it's really interesting. It's really tight because once you go to that location, there's only so many spots available in order to get that one thing. So I love the game board. It's beautiful, and it's just everything that I want in a worker placement game, and that's Yidoh.
Yeah, and you got to be careful because there's a constable patrolling the region. And if your worker gets stuck in the region the constable's patrolling, he beats him and throws him out. You got to go get a worker again, right? The Lords of Waterdeep has direct interaction in that you give players these mandatory quests, which basically sidetrack them for a bit. They can't do anything until they do that. It also has the worker placement idea of I put my guy here so you can't get what I got out of that because I've used up that space. Yidoh is a very similar idea, but it's a little more directly confrontational. They have like assassination missions or whatever, and under the right set of circumstance and me spending the right amount of resources, I can actually kill one of your workers, right? And you'll have to go through and train another worker up. That's a neat addition, and it is more directly confrontational, but it didn't feel mean because you had to work for it. I mean, I did it to her in one of our games, and it took me several turns because I needed things to line up to be able to pull it off. So, I would agree. This is a good game.
And that is our number 3s.
I'm kicking off number 2 with what is, at the time of this recording, a fairly new game from Simon and designer Eric Lang, and that's the Godfather Corleone's Empire. We've been playing this one a lot lately, and you wouldn't think, looking at the theme, that it's worker placement, but essentially what you're doing is sending out your thugs and your family members to gain resources so that you can do jobs for Don Corleone and gain money, which is, the victory points in the game. It's a really tight worker placement game. It works best, in my opinion, at 5 players so that everything is in there as it should be. Everything's nice and tense. You do mobster-like things. You do drive-by shootings and backroom deals, and you set off car bombs, and all of these things require you to gain the appropriate resources to be able to set those off, but you're also trying to bank your cash, and it comes with these little tin suitcases, because if you don't get money in there by the end of the game, any money that you might have left over is just not going to count because you weren't able to launder your money and score those points. Thematically, I love it. I'm a fan of Eric Lang's designs, and this one for me is a huge hit.
What's really interesting too is that you have so many worker placement spots, but as the game progresses, more come up, and they're random.
Tighter.
Well, it gets tighter because you get more thugs or you get more family members, but more spaces open up. So that's a balance that I think they did really well on. There is a little bit of, not necessarily take that, but it's you have to work for it. So it's not like, draw a random card and then, punish somebody. You really have to gather the resources to do that car bomb, right? It's greatly balanced all the way around. I really enjoy it too. Yeah,
this is a worker placement with a lot of player interaction.
Yes.
And if you're not, if your game doesn't have player interaction, you're not playing it right. After a few plays now, I've been wrestling with this title because I enjoy playing it, but I always leave feeling like I don't like it. And I think I figured out last night. It's not that I don't like the game. The game is so tight and the interactions are just walking a razor edge. Okay. So the conclusion I came to last night is this game, when I'm like you, I don't want to play it with anything less than 5 players.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 players is just awesome. But when you're playing with 5 players, if you have players included that aren't familiar with certain points of the game, your game is going to be really chaotic, and something could happen that is just going to send the game spiraling. I think as we play this game more, if you get a group of 5 players that know that the Act 2 mayor is really special, that knows that extortion is in the game, that knows that these things are going to happen and knows that when these businesses combine in these areas, something really special is there. Mm-hmm. You get 5 players that know that stuff, this game is going to be spectacular. Mm-hmm. It's going to be so close.
It's also going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to want that spot. Right?
But in that, it's going to be what these heavy Euro fans really talk about one mistake will wreck you. Mm-hmm. That's how close this game will be if you have players that understand that. Because if you have all those players and they say, oh, that guy won that ally, now we got to turn our tide to them for a while and bust them down because they're going to have the advantage. When you got everybody working toward the people that have the advantage, you're going to have a really close game. You got a group of people that are just learning the game. It's going to be a lot looser than that. But so I'm saying I do like this game, and I think I'm going to grow to like it more as our group really dives into it and understands all of the different aspects of it.
Yeah, and there's, in addition to worker placement, there's an area control piece. Mm-hmm. And we played this last night before we recorded this video today. I realized somewhere along the way, not only is every choice that I make really important to what I'm trying to pull off for that given turn, everybody else's choices play into that too, right? Mm-hmm. Every decision made throughout the course of this game changes something.
Yep.
And that's really cool to me.
I think that's one of the things that may have put you off on it is, it's not that someone may have outplayed you, but even if they made a minor mistake, that completely changed how you had to recover. From
that
it.
Is exactly correct.
Right?
Yep.
But you have to adapt to that because it's going to happen.
Yeah, you do. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, for my number 2, I chose a game from Portal. I love Portal games, and that was Robinson Crusoe by Ignacy Trzewiczek. With Robinson Crusoe, especially with the worker placement of it, you're playing a character, be it an explorer or a cook or whoever, and you're shipwrecked on an island. And you have so many basically actions in order to find shelter, build a fire, look for treasure, build tools, maybe even build weapons, go and hunt for food. And your whole point is that you and your merry band is trying to survive the island. And it's so tight because you feel like there's so much you need to do, but you only have so many actions to do it in. One of my favorite parts of a game that I played was I volunteered to go and hunt for food. I survived, but I got mauled by a bear. So I was able to bring some food back to the group, and I was like, "Yes, I did it. I'm dying, but I did that for the group." And it's just the memories that are created. But as far as the worker placement is concerned, it's that tight. Just a couple of actions that you have to do the best you can. So I really enjoyed Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah. I like it because your actions are split day and evening, right? So if you spend all day doing something, you can get it done free and clear. But, there's a lot more that you need to do in a day than just one thing. So now you say, okay, I'll split it up. Now you got to roll those dice and who knows what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a great game.
Yeah, that leads to those event cards, which I think is probably my favorite part of this deal. Portal has this tagline, board games that tell stories.
Yeah.
And this one does, right? Because you may draw an event that, you find some eggs, which is going to translate into food, and you need food. So obviously you're going to take those, but here's the catch. You shuffle that thing back in the deck now, and it comes up again, and Mama come to avenge the loss of her eggs, right? And these type of things are just all over the place. You get injured and you shuffle it back in, and now when it comes back, your leg's rotting off or whatever. It's just, it beats on you, but in such a rewarding way because it's telling you that story of survival, and the box has just a ton of different scenarios that change up the game a little bit. There's so much in this box. I couldn't possibly recommend that one more.
Well, and it pulls at your emotions too, right? Because it gives you this big old board, this big old map of undiscovered island, and you're like, "Ooh, I want to find everything on the island." Your objective is not to map that island. Right. Your objective is to build that fire to get a ship to come rescue you. But no, you want to go exploring all day. Oh, it's such a great game. This was on my list, I know, so you must have had it higher.
I did.
And so you knocked me down. But yeah, great game. Mine is going to be a TMG title, and that is Orleans. And so I like this guy. Bag building, worker placement. You're going to pull those discs and put them all over your little tableau. And once you fill up, I guess you your workers are almost recipe items, right? So one action will require a certain number of specific type of workers. Once you fill that little lineup, then that action will trigger for you, or you can trigger that action at your leisure. So I just like the way that works, right? It goes beyond just the single place a worker here and take an action. Now it is, I got to invest these workers here to do that. And that, it also kind of has the eminent domain sort of thing of if you do this action enough times, you will get better at doing these actions, right? So
right.
I like how that works. And then, there are other parts of the game, setting merchant houses around the map, collecting resources, selling and trading those for victory points, and then a community board of actions that all the players can work to fulfill. But in the end, man, I think it's just all around a great game.
You really have to control your bag, though, because, eventually you're going to have stuff in there that you no longer need, but it's taking up space. You can only pull out so many workers out of the bag. So you need to be able to cull some of that. So it's managing not only, the placement of the workers, but the workers that you have.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an interesting twist to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a really good game. And I love the bag building thing. That's just, that's so cool. And maybe because I like deck building and it's a similar idea. I think there's a lot to figure out. I don't think I've mastered, the idea of how to play it just yet. And the Intrigue expansion is about to come out, which I think is going to put it in a whole new level. So I'm excited about that. Good game.
So here we are at our number ones. And for me, it's another one by Portal Games and Ignacy Trzewiczek, and that's 51st State Master Set. I love this game. The workers here, you're going out and you're hiring leaders, and then you're sending these workers out to gather resources or work your buildings, which triggers your engine. And this whole thing is just an amazing, intricate puzzle that you've created on your own. And you do have interaction with other players. You can, because you're gathering these buildings from this long set, and they may want that too. But so you do have that interaction when you're building your engine out, but you only have so many workers. And once you run out of workers, then you have to sit it out and wait for everyone else to finish up with the workers that they have. So it's a really interesting game, very intricate. It's post-apocalyptic, which is one of my favorite themes. So this is just double thumbs up for me. I love this game. Thank you, Ignacy.
This is a good game. I like it a lot too. There's a direct player interaction too, though. If one of your opponents has a building that is giving them significant advantage, you can go over there and raise it.
That's true.
You can send your guys to blow it up or whatever.
But again, you got to work towards being able to do that, right?
You got to devote resources to do it.
Yeah.
And it gives them a boon. I mean, they get basically a reward, so to speak, or something back for taking that away from them. So it's not
it's a cool game.
Yeah, I love this game.
Yeah, it's an incredible engine builder. And those workers you only have a few of them, and it's one of those, I take an action, you take an action, you take an action, I take an action, and we do that until you run out of stuff that you can do. So it's kind of sandboxy in that nature, but those workers that you have are so precious because there's only so many of them to gain you resources to feed into your engine to do what you need it to do. Really deep game there, great one.
Yep. My number one is going to be a tried and true old favorite, and it's just deep in my heart. It's the Lords of Waterdeep, Wizards of the Coast. This was, I think, maybe our first worker placement game I was ever exposed to, and God knows how many times I've played it, but it keeps rewarding. So I don't know what else I could say. It's all around cool.
Yeah, I think at this point, this is probably the game we've played more than any other game, especially if you include the app plays because it exactly replicates the game in the app, and we get stuck on a meeting at work and we're going to play 2 or 3 games because a 2-player game can be knocked out in 15 minutes. Just go. So
I will say that probably won't play with both expansions active at one time, but with one of them active and with a good group of folk, it's a great game.
This isn't one of my favorite worker placement games. Maybe it's because we've played it so much and there's so many that are out there to choose from. It's one of those things to where if it's got one piece of it that you don't like, then it kind of sours it a little bit over time. For me, it was those mandatory quests that you could throw on someone else. That was exceptionally mean to that I just be like, it just drives me crazy. So I'd rather have the direct confrontation where you're trying to like assassinate me, like in Yidoh, than throw a mandatory quest that make me waste my resources.
And we seem to be making this point, the mandatory quest. I do still have to send a worker to the harbor and to play an intrigue card, right? So it cost me something to sick you with that. So that's how you do player interaction, right? Yeah. I agree. It's a great game. My number 1 is one that has rocketed up my list of favorite games, and that is Stonemire Games Viticulture Essential Edition. First of all, I don't know that there's a better theme for a Euro game than making wine. It just works in my mind. But this one is so intriguing, primarily because you're playing each turn over the course of the seasons, and you have a limited amount of workers, so you need to send your workers out to do everything, to obtain vines, to plant them, to harvest fields, to make grapes into wine. And the different seasons have different actions available, which is particularly thematic to me. In the spring and summer, you're planting and growing and all of these things, and then you're harvesting and making wine in the fall and winter. And if I use all my guys in the spring, I can't do any of that stuff in the winter because I'm out of workers. So you really got to plan out your turn. It's really tight. It scales based on each space has available spaces based on the number of players. So it keeps the game tight. It keeps you engaged, and you've got to stay on top of and plan your farm, your vineyard, the entire way through the game. I love the depth here. I love the complexity. One of my new favorite games is Viticulture Essential Edition.
The one thing about that, too, is that it really scales well because depending on the number of players that you have, the number of worker placement spots change, right? So, of course, the more players you have, you can have 3 spots open at the planting or to get a vine card. If you're only doing a one-on-one, a 2-player game, well, there's only two spots available. So it's really interesting how well that they scaled it. Another thing that just came to me actually that I noticed is that you only have so many workers to use, but if you go and get those visitor cards, some of those cards let you do an action that normally you would have to place a worker there to do it. So it would allow you to build at like paying half cost or build 2 buildings, one at full price. And, there's different things in there that allows you to do something extra that you normally wouldn't have a worker to do. So that's an interesting thing too. Yeah.
And I like the expansions to it. I want to try some more of them. You mentioned, Lucas, that the mamas and papas in setup kind of gives you the feel that you're inheriting the vineyard, right? Yep. And I think that it's really thematic, and the play makes you feel like you've inherited this vineyard and are now having to manage it. It's a great game.
Yep. That is our 15 favorite worker placement games. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please click like on it and join in the conversation below in the comments. Let us know your favorite worker placement games. We also hope that we've exposed you to maybe a worker placement game you weren't familiar with. So if it's a genre that you enjoy or a mechanic that you enjoy, I would encourage you to check out these 15 games because we all think they're great. So for Roll to Hit Gaming, I'm Lucas.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Chip.